My degree is in public health, and a lot of times we look at relationships between, for myself specifically, climate and health. And a lot of issues we run into is that we just don't have the data we want to try to get the measurement we want. Like, we want to know, like, how does precipitation affect the flu?
Right.
And we may not have the proper data to use to actually figure out that calculation. So this poster was kind of describing, like, what do we do when we don't have the data we want? How do we make sure that the data is good enough if it's not what we want, et cetera. So it's kind of like a case example looking at Anza Borrego specifically. So some of the ideas that we had wanted in terms of when we first got together with Water UCI was to see, El Nino is a really responsible climate factor in this region, especially in terms of the wildflower growth.
Right.
And so what we wanted to do was to see, okay, well, how do we know if El Nino actually does affect wildflower growth? So then some of the issues we had with in terms of just getting data is, Anza Borrego is a pretty small area. So how can you downscale appropriately? And can you downscale appropriately because you have different climates very near to it?
Right.
So that's kind of the first idea is like, what is a scale that's close enough to be able to be used? And then in addition, how do you measure wildflower growth? Are there any variables that do that? Not really. So then what we used was the town has availability of like park traffic. So like how many visitations happen each month and each year.
Right.
So it's like, well, can we use that to determine if that's enough? But we don't have as many years as we would like to really be able to see a pattern. So that's like another example of like park visitation. Like, is that enough data that we need? And then if we kind of keep going, this was looking at El Nino and park visitation. Can we figure out if there's a comparison there in terms of the relationship? And looking at, lag times, is it El Nino the year before that affects park visitation and wildflowers, because the park visitation is really dependent on the wildflowers because that's the beauty that brings people here. So, is that appropriate proxy? And so, like, we can see, okay, well, if we do maybe a year lag, we can see that sometimes some of the things line up, but then it looks like that they don't at some point. So, is
So it's
that
not
good
necessarily predictable.
Yeah, and so then it was just like, can we use this type of information? And that's just kind of the issues with the objectives that we have and that a lot of times public health individuals face. So, like, how do we measure the true effect of climate on a town's prosperity? How will the impact of movement to regreen the valley really affect this? And, just kind of some food for thought because this is kind of a general, specific example taken to the public health realm, but like, how can data collection help, achieve the analysis we want? What do we do if we don't have a large amount of data? And what data is good enough to use when we don't have the data we want? And what do public health officials do when the stakes are more dire? So that's just like some questions to think about in terms of how we can get data and how we look at data.
And so what are some of the things that have come up that made you, change your mind about something that you discovered or some of the data?
Well, with this stuff is that, like, we determined that it wasn't a good proxy, the park visitations, and that we would need probably more information, maybe looking at, El Nino might be just too interannual, it's too large of a scale. Maybe we would need to look at like the precipitation effects in the local area as like other options, or maybe more of
So
a
like
soil moisture index.
So like getting weather data.
Yeah.
Right.
At a local level, and then being able to determine, probably counting runoff because you have the hills that are kind of a blocking mechanism. So that's all like kind of stuff to.
Right, because like you have the sculptures too. That a lot of people come here for the sculptures now. So that's
exactly. Yeah. So how does that affect this? And
right.
Are there other things, other lag times, other factors we just don't know? And so it's like trying to figure that out. That's really kind of a lot of issues that people doing research have.
Right. And so, what do you think are the next steps or things that will make you get better data points on all of that?
Probably thinking like, what data do we need? You know, trying to get maybe more local scale data, like collectors, you know, so like to collect precipitation or to like the measurements.
Like our new weather station.
Exactly. So like weather stations that collect maybe more things than just like precipitation, like something that does soil moisture, and kind of a better mapping tool that really understands the more local level. And then the problem is that you need to get a lot of data for that. So then you can't really go backwards. So then, you know, it's really trying to figure out what you're going to do moving forward.
Right.
And
So it's all fresh data.
Yeah, so that way you don't have to wait 20 years to do the analysis, you know. How can we really figure out what's going on? That's kind of some issues that scientists have to deal with.